Hey guys, I am Demon Bane. Welcome back to another video. Today I've got something a little bit different planned. I know I've been talking a lot about how I paint miniatures for Warhammer and D&D and things like that. So I'm going to go through and show you some of my miniatures. And I'm going to reposition the camera and I'm going to show you guys some of the things that I do when I'm painting. Some of my techniques, which are common techniques used by a lot of different people. I was actually trained in a technique called dry brushing, and a lot of people, learn about it from various places, but I won a tournament about 10 years ago. I won a tournament at Games Workshop in Orland Park in Illinois, and they had a Golden Demon winner, which is like their big painting competition for Games Workshop. And he came in and he taught a bunch of people who had won tournaments and various prizes how to do dry brushing, okay? Now, in the painting world, there's a lot of different techniques that people use, but dry brushing is a technique that I use the most, and I'm going to kind of show you guys how I go about doing it. My way is a little bit different than some people, but it has the same basic premise. Most people, when they use dry brushing technique, the idea is to get a little bit of paint on the brush and then rub the excess off on like a napkin or something like that. For me, I use the back of my hand. The warmth from the skin actually dries the paint relatively quickly, allows me to keep it, the paint dry, and it takes less time for the paint on the brush to come off and dry, so that it can make just a light pass and things like that. Okay, some of the models that I've painted before are here. This guy here is Heinrich Kemmler. Alright, this guy here is a guy called Heinrich Kemmler. Okay, I've painted him 2 or 3 years ago. I painted him. My technique has gotten better since then, and I've painted some other models. This guy here is a Warhammer Giant that I've modified to work for the Vampire Count's army back when fantasy was still, fantasy and before it became Age of Sigmar, and the one before that, which was End Times, which was when I was actually playing. So this is supposed to be my version of like a zombie giant. My colors for my army were red and purple, so as you see, various models that I've painted, and as you can see here, all of this stitching here is actual green stuff that I've put on there. His intestines here are green stuff that I've put together, and I cut a hole in his stomach with a soldering iron, and then split it out a little bit, put some green stuff around it to get the look like his intestines are coming out. But yeah, that's some of the models I've painted. I have an entire army that I'm going to be working on, and tonight I am going to be painting this model here. This is a Lamian vampire from the Warhammer Fantasy Vampire Counts range. She's an older model. I don't know if they still are around anymore. A lot of the models that I have been painted and stripped and sprayed again and repainted and stripped. But she's the model that I'm going to try to paint for you tonight. She's a beautiful model, and I love the way she looks, holding out her scepter like this, like she's going to blast you to oblivion. Okay guys, so here I am about ready to start painting on this beautiful little guy, girl, this little Lamian vampire here. So what I'm going to start with first, seeing as how my primary colors that I like to do are purple and red, so I'm thinking that I'm going to make the dress here purple, and maybe do these arm parts purple here. I'm thinking about maybe making these little sleeves here a lighter color, possibly even this blue violet here from Vallejo. I have a tendency to use a lot of Vallejo paints. I think they end up working very, very well. They're very beautiful. I've heard people say that they're very high pigment count. That's why they're better. This here is my paintbrush cup. It's a little bit dusty, a little bit dirty. It's something I made in high school, and it's just always kind of worked for this.
And, well, I've been painting for over 10 years, so without further ado, let's get started. As you can see, this is my palette here. It's just a normal tile that you can buy at any home goods store, like a Menards or a Home Depot. You want to make sure that you always shake up your paints. And there's probably going to be a couple of times when I fast forward in this video, just as kind of a, otherwise, you know, you guys could be sitting here for over an hour watching me paint. And I'm going to do my best to show you as much as possible here. I need to thin out the paint a little bit. You want to make your paint about the consistency of skim milk. At least that's what I've been told, and that's what I always try to do. And then here you'll see what I do to get all the excess paint off, as I just use the back of my hand. And I'm not sure if this brush will work the best, or if I'll end up switching to another brush. As you see here, I'm just trying to get the majority of the paint off. This first coat is going to be kind of thick, because this is going to be what we call the base coat. So here, as you see, I'm just going to start filling in the spots all here on her dress. And like I said, this first coat is okay to be a little bit thick, but you want to kind of just spread it around as much as you can on here. Keep in mind, this is just going to be the base coat, so there's a lot of stuff that we're going to paint over later, so it all works out okay. Just try to make sure that I get in all the little cracks, because when we do the dry brushing later on, it's going to be much more important to make sure that we've gotten in this base coat first. Because this is what you're going to see in the valleys and in the shadows, this darker color. So, now I've painted this lady before, and then I stripped her of all of her paint and then reprimed her. Priming is when we coat the model with a color before we start painting, just as kind of like a prep to get her ready. So I've looked at this model a couple of times, okay? So now you see if I can try to get this thing to focus here, her legs here, okay? I've been debating a couple of times, see if I can get this to focus a little bit, on her legs here. Is her leg just skin here, and is this like a garter belt, or what? But I don't know. I'm going to leave her, her flesh, her skin alone here and make it like a flesh tone color. And just kind of, you know, make her look sexy as heck. So now as we get this base coat and we kind of build up the layers a little bit here, you're going to have to go over it a couple of times here. Just remember, you don't want thick paint on here. You want to be nice and thin. My very first army I painted, I just used the paint straight out of the pots. I didn't water it down at all, and I was using the Games Workshop paints at the time. They're really expensive. They're still really expensive, and it's at a point right now where the Vallejo paints, which are actually, in my opinion, a little bit better than the Games Workshop paints, are actually quite a bit better, the Vallejo. So just kind of want to get the bulk of the paint off of the brush here. Now you'll notice that it still looks really dark on the model here. Now that's good. Basically what we're doing is we're allowing the natural black that we spray painted in the beginning with the primer coat to kind of like shine through a little bit here. See? Let's make sure. And you want to make sure that you get all of the cloth on the dress here, because you don't want to have to worry about coming back later, because that's going to mess things up. Alright, so that's good for the first coat here. Now that we're done with the purple,
the darker purple.
And dry it off on a piece of a good quality paper towel. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take this lighter, this blue violet here, and we're going to use this as a highlight. I just want to shake it up, try to get it all mixed up, and we're going to put a little bit in a separate spot. Okay? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of this darker purple, and then we're going to mix it with the blue purple. What is it called? The blue violet. And we're just going to, and because we're done with this darker, it doesn't really matter if we mix a little bit on accident. We're just trying to get it to darken up a little bit to act as a intermediary, an in-between color between the heavy violet. And then this is where we really need to make sure that we get the majority of the paint off. Okay? Otherwise, you'll end up having issues. You see, just go back and forth a couple of times until it goes sort of like that. Okay? All we're trying to do is do a light coat. So all we do is we just lightly brush across the grain of the cloth. Okay? We're just trying to go nice and light. We don't want to put any serious pressure. And what it'll do is it'll give this effect that almost makes her dress look like velvet. Okay? And it's going to give it this really nice highlighting effect. And just be careful not to go overboard with it, but you're just trying to make the thing look cool. And you don't have to go crazy. I know a lot of people talk about like 50, 60 layers and all that other stuff. People that I've talked to, people that win like Golden Demon and stuff. But we're not trying to make anything super duper fancy here. We're just trying to make the model look good to be on the tabletop. And to be, you know, recognizable as, you know, this is your lady. And sometimes, and the big thing you got to remember is that when you've got this bright light like the one I have on here, it's gonna, when you're putting it in a regular light, it's gonna look a little bit different. So you just want to try to make it look as best as possible in this light. Okay? Now, see how I've got the highlights on there, and it looks really nice, and that's pretty cool. Now we're gonna go even lighter with practically the straight up the blue violet. And I know a lot of people would do many more layers. I don't really think that's all that necessary. I mean, we're not trying to compete for Golden Demon. We're just trying to make the lady look nice. You want to make sure that your brush is pretty doggone dry. Okay? So, here we go. Again, dry your brush. Now, because we've already done the highlights, now we really only want to do this on the highest points. Okay? So this part of the dress sticks out quite a bit down at the bottom here. So we just want to lightly go up just a little bit. See? The thing we have to remember about vampires, which is what this lady is, the vampire, is that they are very fair. Now, there are some pictures that I've seen of vampires that they go ahead and make their faces almost gray. Okay? Now, I don't really like that, and I don't really like that style. The way that I do vampires is I try to make them look extremely beautiful. Okay? Now, what I'm going to use here is a pale flesh what is this? A leather brown and a white. Okay. Now I'm going to start with this leather brown here. Yeah. Same technique that I did with the purple, lightening everything up to make the flesh awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and do all the flesh now. Alright, now we've got all the skin tone done, and the dress is pretty much done. I'm going to go ahead and let it dry for a little bit to get the skin tone all perfect so I can go ahead and set up to the next step. Okay, so the darker brown has set up and looks great. So now, what we need to do is start working on lightening it up. Now, I know a lot of people like vampires really pale. I don't. I think I've already said this. So I'm going to work my way up from the darker brown to a rather pale color, but still relatively bronzed. Because, well, I like my vampires beautiful. But not sparkly, of course. Because, you know, sparkly vampires are the devil. And the weird thing is that when you're mixing the darker colors like this brown, you really don't need that much. Just a very little bit darkens stuff up really. Can you see that? There? See how it's darkening it up really, really quickly? So we want to make sure this is just a dry brush technique. Like I said before, dry brushing is kind of my bread and butter for painting. I can do a couple of other techniques, but it's kind of my speciality. Okay, I'm probably going to need to take that off at some point. It's okay if you splash over a little bit. This is just the first couple coats. And when you're going to a really, really light color, you're going to need multiple coats. And if you go over the purple, it's okay. Try not to, just because it's going to be a pain in the neck to fix later. Not the end of the world. The last phase that anybody does as painter is called the cleanup phase, where you basically clean up any mistakes that you've made. But keep in mind, the more delicate and careful you are now, the less amount of work you'll have to do during the cleanup phase. The key thing is not to worry about being perfect. And even though she's going to look really pale right now, with the technique that I'm going to do later, it'll all be okay. You'll see. Alright, now you can see a little bit better. Had to set the focus on the camera a little bit tighter. As you can see, she's coming along pretty well. And that's actually, you can actually see that now down at the bottom. That's actually a little black cat. Or, well, a little cat. I have a tendency for vampire counts to go with the whole black cat idea. Just because it looks, it makes more sense. Also, you can see on her headdress, it kind of has this whole, like, Egyptian theme. So I'm going to work that out now. her hair looks like it's in some sort of dreadlock of some kind. So I think I'm going to work on that next. Now you can see this silver spot on the top of her head. That's going to be a pain in the neck later, I have a feeling. It's where the primer from handling the model, after it was primed, is kind of rubbed off. Now, painting white, I'm going to start with the gray wall and then go to this. The stone wall gray to the white. Now, because this is going to be a base coat for a couple of spots, I don't really want to thin it. Alright, so I've got her basic colors done, and she's looking good. Oh, I guess more stuff. And that's the thing with models, no matter how many times you think you're done, or think that you finished a color, you're going to come back and find more stuff that you've got to do. Alright guys. So here's where she's at right now. You saw where she was. My camera is about to die here, so I'm going to end the vlog for tonight, and I will finish her up probably tomorrow, and we will continue on this. Alright? Good night, guys, and take care.